Yes, are we live? Okay, good. Welcome. Welcome everybody. I am not entirely sure why I'm not seeing the chat in OBS, but that's fine. I'll just open up my I'll just open up the chat from YouTube. That's fine too. For some reason the chat is not working in OBS, but that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Let me just quickly put up an extra little window on my other screen. Cool. Welcome everybody. Welcome. Pick up the phone. My phone is somewhere over there. I don't want to be distracted by my phone right now. Okay, good. We're live. So, welcome everybody to the 174 production marathon. I'm going to be the last one for today, and I wanted to do something a little bit different than everybody else have been doing. Until now, everybody else has been doing track breakdowns, and I thought that I could do that as well. I have a couple of tracks that I am going to be releasing soon that I could be breaking down, but, you know, I figured let's just do something else. And I think we're just going to do some production, sound design maybe. Maybe I'll even have a look at the chat and see what you guys want, and what you guys would be, what you would like to see. I could also talk about building up tension, or just resampling techniques. Don't really have much of an specific goal in mind for today. I just wanna, yeah, from scratch. From scratch, exactly. Just gonna be doing something from scratch and basically just showing you guys some stuff about making drum bass. I guess just getting an idea down and just maybe getting a start to a track, or just doing some sound design and seeing how you can sort of like come up with something. Now I cannot make a full track though. I'm gonna have to say that right now. I wish I could, but in the time that we have, that's not gonna be an option. I could, you know, I could make a bass line, but then we're probably gonna end. I could start writing a drop, but we're probably not gonna end up writing a full drop today. That's not gonna be. We don't have that much time, so. Tension, transition, and drops. Well, see, I think with building tension, something that I've been doing a lot lately is taking very simple sounds, just taking a very simple sound and then exploring effects. For instance, I'm using Ableton, so exploring effects within Ableton and really putting a lot of automation in it to kind of build up tension over time, and that is really well. It's something that really helps if you're making 2 hours, make it a challenge. I mean, when I start off, it's always a bit of a gamble, you know. I am taking a bit of a risk here, you know. The thing is, when you're starting from scratch, what I find always is it's not necessarily about if what you make is good. You know, you're putting in some practice, you're putting in some hours, and that's always good. But when you're doing something from scratch, one time it might turn out really nice, but the other time it might turn out, well, maybe not that good. But there's always going to be some sounds that you might be able to save for later sessions. So I don't think it's like, even if it doesn't turn out good, it's not like you've wasted any time. For instance, you've basically still made sounds that you probably will be able to make or will be able to use in a different track. But yeah, I think today I just wanna get started. So what should we start with? Let's see. Got like a good folder here of bounce down atmosphere sounds. It's something that I do every now and then. I think in the previous STRANJAH live stream as well, there was a little bit of a talk in the chat about separating sound design from production sessions, and that's also why I'm not entirely sure if we're gonna do a full drop design today or if we're more gonna be doing sound design, because I also kind of split up these sessions most of the times. So what I do, for instance, a lot is with these atmosphere sounds here, for instance, I just go and open up a couple of synths that I own and just go through some presets and play a couple of notes in a key that you use a lot or in a key that you're planning to use, and just bounce down patches to audio so that you have some good samples that you can start with. For instance, something like that, you could use that to start an intro with, right? I guess we can just do that. Let's just start. No time is ever wasted. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah, so we could just put this into a sampler. Set that to the right key. This is in E, so let's just set that to E. I guess I'll work in E as well for today. And you can put this in as audio as well if you want, but I guess, you know what, I'm actually gonna do it as audio so I can see the waveform right here. I like that a little bit more. Let's just do, let's do that. Let's bring one of these in. Which one? Kind of like that one. Let's just unwarp it so that we don't get any weird artifacts, no pun intended, or maybe pun was intended, but let's just start like that. Oh, is that too loud as well? Let me know. Should be fine. And we can maybe take a short section. That's something that I do a lot, is taking a short section from a loop like this and then looping that over and over and using that to kind of build an intro from. So let's just say we're gonna do this, and then let's just get rid of all of that. I don't really need it. And let's find a little bit of a section that sounds cool. Maybe this one is even too low. Oh, that could work. There's some cool, interesting sounds in that. Let's warp it, and then what I usually do is just take a section like that and just loop that. So you already kind of get a little bit of an interesting vibe going because there's a looping element. Now we do get a bit of a click happening, but we can easily fix that. Just add a little fade. Where are you guys from? We're watching right now. I'm just looking at the chat, but let me know where you guys are from. Let's see how many different nationalities we got in the chat right now. So, I guess I'll just quickly add some hats as well. Oh, I still have a hat folder open right here. That's always convenient. Now, when I'm doing hats, a lot of times what I'll do, especially when I work with one-shot samples, I just take a drum rack, and I'll just put the drum rack into a MIDI track right here, and then just take a bunch of random one-shot samples that I think could be cool. And sometimes I'll just actually go through and select ones that I think are really good, but a lot of times what I'll usually do is just take a selection, just drop them all into a drum rack so that you have a whole bunch of different hats, and you can then play around with the different hats and try out different ones without having to, you know, search for new samples all the time. So you could, for instance, just take a little bit of a selection, something like that. Let's just throw that in here. That's going to take a bit of time, of course, because it's quite a bit of samples. And then let's turn snapping off for all of them. And by the way, did you see what I just did? If you have a bunch of samples, let me take a sip of water. A lot of USA, Serbia, but watching from China. Worldwide, damn. Welcome. All over the world. That's good to see. That's good to see. The DIY Addictive Drums rack. Well, I do have addictive drums as well, and I use it a lot. But I don't know. Most of the time when I'm making a track, it's usually a combination of more live-sounding percussion hits for the cymbals or for the hi-hats. Sometimes actually for the hi-hats as well. But what I do for a lot of times with hi-hats is I'll have either one or two elements that are just one-shot samples so that they're really consistent, and then I'll most of the time add some more live-sounding bits on top of it to kind of give it more variety. I feel usually that works quite well for what I do. Now, what I just what I wanted to show here is if you have a bunch of hats inside of one drum rack, and you want to turn all the snapping off, all of the individual ones, you could go through all of these, but that's going to be a pain to do, right? It's just a lot of individual samples that you have to go through. So what you can do is just select one, and by default the snapping is on. Turn it off, and then right click, and then you can say copy value to all siblings. And what that means, it's going to take that value and it's going to copy it to all the other hits as well. So now the snapping is off for all of these, and you can do that with everything. So let's say you want to bring the volume up, you can bring the volume up and then right click, copy that value to all siblings, and then all the individual samples in here will have the same volume. So that's great if you want to, you know, work with a whole bunch of samples into a rack. It's just going to be a lot easier than going through all of them, because back in the day they didn't have that option, and you would just have to go through every single pad here and just change the volume one by one, which is, yeah, you don't want to do that. Okay, so this is quite a long section, I think. How long is this? 16 bars? Yeah. Okay, so we're just gonna make maybe a shorter section and just loop that. And because we have a whole bunch of different hats in here, we can now just start playing around with them and trying out different ones. So kind of like those ones. So let's just take one of these, and I'll just start with a really basic pattern for now, and we're just gonna try and sort of like write down a track structure idea, sort of like get us started and seeing where that leads us, because that's usually what happens when I do a session. Of course, I don't always have an idea in mind. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll start with a specific goal, like I'm gonna be making a drop with a breeze, or I'm gonna be making a track around this vocal sample, but most of the time I don't. Most of the time I just start, I wake up in the morning, I open up my DAW, I start working, and I just see where it leads me. And sometimes I like what I get, sometimes I don't, and if I don't like what I get, then most of the time it just evolves into a sound design session, which might happen tonight, who knows. So we can start with that, maybe. And let's just rename this one. I'll just call this hats. And with this pad, so it's just a very simple looping thing right now. Let's make this a bit more interesting. So we're going to start by, let's just low pass this and then open up that filter over time. It's all about building tension when you're writing an intro, right? So you want to start something that is a little bit less full, and then over time make it fuller, build up that tension, and then work your way towards a drop. So we could start something like this. Now that's a lot of sub. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to bring this one up a bit more. And let's just high pass this as well, because we don't need that much sub in an intro. That's more something that we could use. We could even do a steeper curve so that we totally get rid of the sub. Okay, and then in the next section, I guess we want to bring maybe a kick drum in, something like that. So we could take, I'm not going to design everything from scratch today, because that way we're going to end up sitting here for, well, hours, and we don't have more than 2 hours, so I'll just grab some of these, which is just basically, these are samples that I'm working on. If you want to help support me, by the way, I have permission to promote my Patreon. I recently started a Patreon, and on Patreon I am currently posting all of the patches from my sound design tutorials on my own channel, and I also post a lot of samples on there, and I'm currently working on a couple of different sample packs. I'm working on a couple of different Ableton racks, and basically all of those are posted on my Patreon. So if you want to help support and you want to get some of these samples that I'm going to be using right now, you will be able to get them soon on my Patreon. Currently they're not on there yet because I'm still making the pack, but they're going to be posted there soon. So that is patreon.com/ARTFX. So if you want to help, that's how you can do. Okay, So for the next section, I guess we want to bring in a kick drum. Now I'm not sure if this is going to be the right kick drum, but we'll just start with this one. I like to just set up a little thing like this, and then just make this clip as long as the kick drum, and then I can just move this around and just start playing around with the pattern. So we have this one that's rising. I'm going to, well, let's just make it rise a little bit more during this section. Could also make it back down a bit here again, and then make it rise again, like that. Now, another cool thing that I think is always good to do, if you have a repeating element like this, is take something like elevotal and give it some more movement. Maybe 1/2. Just create a shape like this, and then maybe back it down a bit so it's not taking it out completely, but adding some more movement. Might get a little bit quiet now. So let's just boost the volume a bit. I do have a Discord. I just saw that question real quick. I do have a Discord. I'm not sure if is the Discord. I don't think it's listed in the description. I'll grab you guys a link later. I can grab you guys a link later. Probably at the end of the stream, when we're doing the question round. How do I change the color of the mute buttons? Well, actually, that is my own Ableton skin. I have my own Ableton skin, and that skin is also available on my Patreon. So if you want to have this skin with everything turned blue, then you can go to my Patreon as well, because that is on there right now. You can download it there. So I'll just put in one kick drum sample for now, and then I'll go back into that folder of my one-shot kicks that I had, and I can just try out different ones. I have a whole bunch of different ones here that sound quite similar in a way, but they're all slightly different. Oh, that one is quite nice. Like, it has a bit of a clicky high end, which for the intro might be too much, but I kind of like it when it's layered with that hat though, so it's not necessarily that big of an issue. Maybe even do a different pattern, maybe even just do this. Okay, no. We're gonna do the other pattern that we had, that's better. It's been a while since I've used FL Studio. It's really been a while. I used to be an FL Studio user myself, but let me adjust the chat. I'm gonna put the chat on the other side of my window. That's better. That way I don't have to look over my shoulder all the time. Yeah, it's been a really long time since I've used FL. I actually started out with FL myself. Not really FL. I started out with Magic's Music Maker, and then eventually after that, when I got more serious, I got FL, and I had been using that for a really long time. But yeah, eventually I just switched to Ableton, and I really liked it a lot more, so that's what kind of sticked. Now, should we do a bit of sidechaining on that pad? Could be fun to the kick drum. I'm not sure if we're gonna do that, but for now I'll just put a little MIDI clip here on my sidechain track. I have two tracks right here, which is my kick and my snare sidechain, and I can play you real quick what that is. So in here I have a little white noise sample in basically just a sampler. Really short, plucky volume envelope here. You can see about 8 milliseconds, and that is my input for my sidechain. So what it is, really just a very short click sample, and I have two of them. One that I can use for the kick drum and one that I can use for the snare drum, so I can sidechain independently to them to each other. Because sometimes I only want to sidechain to the kick drum. Sometimes you might only want to sidechain to the snare. So I don't like having them. I don't like having one for both of them, if you get what I mean. I should try out Bitwig. Bitwig. I've been looking at it and it looks really cool. It's just I've never tried it, and when I was having the whole switch between Ableton and FL, or from FL to Ableton, I should say, I think Bitwig wasn't even released yet, so I didn't got a chance to play around with it. We can try out a bit of sidechain on that pad layer to see if that is going to be interesting, even though it already has volume movement. Where is it? I'm still not used to the new Ableton categories in the effects. I can turn it off, but the list is getting a bit long. So we can just set up a sidechain real quick. I have the Ableton Live 8 sidechain compressor. It's available on the Ableton website, so if you don't have it and you're using Ableton Live 10 or Ableton Live 11, you can go to the Ableton website and log in, and you can download the Live 8 Legacy Pack, which includes this compressor from Ableton Live 8, which for some reason still sounds better for sidechaining than the one in Ableton Live 10 and 11. So yeah. Definitely advise you, if you want to use a compressor for sidechaining, then get that one, because it just sounds better. Doesn't click as much, and the one in Ableton 10 and I think the one in Live 9 as well, they had a bit more of a clicky kind of character because they changed the way how the modes worked, the algorithms underneath the compressor, and I don't know, this one still just for some reason works better. Is Matthews using Bitwig? So we could use it a bit more creative and use a bit of a longer release time. And that way the pad started getting a little bit of a sort of like a creative movement that follows the pattern of the kick drum. It's gonna be very subtle, but okay, should we do... what should we do here? Do I add a snare drum as well? While we're at it? Might have some good snare drum samples here. Kinda like that one. Yeah, I knew he uses Cubase. Most of the time when I watch his stuff, I see that he uses Cubase a lot, and I didn't know he also used Bitwig though. Like I'm really curious to try it out as well. I've been looking at it for a couple of years now, and I think it looks pretty cool. So might have to give it a shot. How much is Bitwig? Does anybody know? Okay, we can maybe add another pad underneath it, doing something different. We are in E, so... Now, one classic thing to do would be to just go from E to F, one semitone intervals, and just repeat that over and over. And then start playing with the patch. That's maybe even too long. Maybe even... So when it comes to writing intros, I don't necessarily think you want to have much sub. So what I always do is make sure the high pass layer is like this. What can we do to this one to make it interesting? $400 for the complete edition. That's not even that bad. That's not even that bad. I might give it a shot. I might give it a shot. To be honest, I don't like this pad. Let's just get rid of it. Yeah, I know that the Bitwig former CEO is indeed part of the. He was part of the Ableton team. Yeah, it was. I think it was a couple of people from the Ableton team that hopped over and started Bitwig, which makes sense. I mean, it looks very similar. If you look at Bitwig and look at Ableton, they have a very similar sort of like workflow, very similar interface. So yeah, I can see that. So we have this one. Now, what about we use this one to create another layer? So let's just duplicate that. Let's just get rid of that EQ. I'm gonna get rid of these two as well. And oh, I removed them on the wrong one. No big deal. So let's see if we can make another layer for this, for the intro. So one really great tool that I found in Ableton Live 11, since they've done the update now, is a really interesting tool, and it's called the Spectral Resonator. Now this thing is absolutely phenomenal for, I guess, just making anything that needs tension. It's a really interesting instrument. So let's just take this one. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the Spectral Resonator. Now, if you just listen to what it does, it basically creates almost like a reverb tone, or it's not necessarily a reverb, it's more like a resonating frequency, and you set it to a particular frequency here, or you can tune it to a note. So what you can do, for instance, if you're working in E, like this one, set this to E, and it already turns our pad into something completely different. Now, it sounds very static right now, but we can play with these effects, and let's say add a bit of chorus. And we can mix the original one back in as well if we want, but let's just leave it at fully wet for now, so that we can hear what we're doing. You've also got the Wonder mode, which sounds slightly different. And then the weird granular mode. Want to make weird bleepy sounds, you can use that one. But the chorus mode I quite like. You can add some unison. And you can already hear automating that, for instance, towards the end is going to add more tension. So, for instance, we could automate this throughout here to give it more tension. But the main thing that I think would be good for tension, so let's just bring this up a little bit so we get a bit of unison, is this thing right here. So you've got this section right here, and you've got this stretch control. Now what that does is, this effect in general, what it really does is you set a note, for instance here, so we're setting it to E2, and then it's going to keep that note. That note is always going to be there, so E2 is always going to be part of this sound, but the moment we start basically messing with this stretch control, it's going to take all the harmonics above that E2 note, and it's going to pitch them up and down. So if we bring this up, it's going to pitch them up. If we bring it down, it's going to pitch them down. But that fundamental frequency is not going to be pitched. So listen what happens if I bring this one up over time. So let's just do maybe in the second half. It starts sounding like we have a pitch bend, but there is no pitch bend. And you don't really hear that fundamental frequency in this one, because I don't think there's much of that E2 in this sound. That one works well too. E1. So here it sounds just like this. Just a static sound. And then the moment it comes here, it's gonna start rising. But if I would leave the original low end in, then you'll see that that low frequency here is gonna stay on that same note. See? You can hear that the low note is not pitching up. It's only the higher harmonics that are going up now. And the same thing is if we make it go down. So it's a really interesting effect, and I find it works really well if you just use this a little bit. Just make it... Let's start from this one. Could even just do it over the entire section. Come on. Now it gets a little bit weird right now. Let's do it again. Let's make sure that it starts from 0 here. Let's see where I want to bring that in. Another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some volume movement to this, because I probably don't want this layer to come in right away. Just want this to fade in over time. Just do something like that. Sometimes it just doesn't work well on that layer. You might just have to find a different section. So we can just find a different section of this sample and see what it does there. And if that noise gets too much, you can also low pass it, because then that noise is not going to affect this one as well. So boost that decay a little bit so we get a bit more volume out of it. And then maybe during the second half we're going to pitch it up a bit. It's a really hard to control effect though, but if it works really well. I don't think it works too well on this one though. That's the whole thing, but I wanted to show you this effect because it's such a cool one. I mean, it does still work a little bit. It gets a bit weird towards the end, but it's mostly this frequency right here that's being pitched now. That one right there. Not sure if that one is sounding too good. Let's just mute it for now. Dongles are absolutely horrible. Yes, I agree. They are a really annoying thing that we sometimes have to deal with. Yes. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, let's see if we can make something rhythmic coming in here. If anybody has any questions right now during the stream, just feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'll be doing the question and answer at the end as well. But if I see anything in the corner of my eye that makes me go, hey, I can show that with this thing that we're doing right now, then I'll actually show it live on stream. Because at the end of the stream, we're probably just going to be doing questions and just answering those questions. But if you really have something specific that I can show you right now, then definitely let me know in the chat. Okay, later, Maddie. Good that you were here. Sad that you have to leave, but no big deal. You'll be able to watch this back later as well. I used to use Cubase as well, but it's been a really long time since I've used that one. Okay, this one I probably want to sidechain before we start doing something to it. Well, we don't have to. We can always worry about it later. What kind of sound should we make for this one? That's actually quite nice to automate that distortion, to kind of add some more distortion somewhere towards the end. We're actually kind of making a bass now, so might as well see if we can use... Could try and make a rhythmic drop. See if we can make a good pattern for this. See, this is what always happens when I just do sessions from scratch. I work on something happens, I get inspired, and I start doing something else, and then eventually you get something you like. So if you are struggling with this and struggling with starting from scratch, and you always get this feeling when you have this blank canvas, don't worry to just throw something at the wall and see what sticks. Like, really. Don't worry, you can always remove things later or mute it if you don't like it. You can always go through your project at some point and see if everything that is there really needs to be there. But I'll guarantee you that if you always get stuck with just starting from scratch, just do something, you know, just start putting sounds in, and it doesn't matter if they sound a little bit crap at first. Like, eventually you'll be able to just put some more effects on it, put some more processing on it, and work them into a full track. But you have to start somewhere, right? And if you're just gonna sit there looking at an empty project for a long time, you're only gonna hate yourself. Drums in key. I usually have my drums in key. Usually I do have them in key. See, that could be a pattern. See, I'm just looking for a groove right now. I'm looking for something that makes me go, yeah, that is a groove that I can work with. And just to make sure that we're not going to have any clashing elements, especially between the kick and snare and the bass, I'm just going to add a little bit of sidechain to that. Or maybe even just quite a bit of sidechain. So just add this, let me do it on a group. Let me just group that into a group. Let's call that bass bad. Yeah, okay, let's call it bad, sure. And let's set that to the kick sidechain. And then just duplicate that and set that one to the snare sidechain. So now we should see we get... It's very subtle on this one, but it will definitely help towards the end. Okay, I'll call it bass. Yeah. When it comes to tuning drums, I think what is very important as well is how long the drum sounds are, and as well kind of what sounds they are. Like if they are really short percussion sounds, the pitch is probably not gonna matter. If they are really short kick drums that are more just like a little punch that you get and just give a little bit of weight, it doesn't really matter too much what the pitch is. If it's a really long 808 kick drum, it's gonna matter. If it's a pitch with a really, or if it's a snare drum with a really strong fundamental frequency, it's probably gonna matter. But even then, sometimes it just sounds better when it's not in tune, you know? Okay, I actually quite like that pattern. Even though it's very basic right now, I quite like that pattern itself. So let's just see if we can work with that. I'll just make this section. And should we try and maybe do a little variation somewhere? Maybe just do that at the end somewhere. Let's just group these. I don't necessarily like the key tracking in here. I most of the time just do it with the note modulator, because you get more control. See, you can kind of just play. That's the lowest note, so just move this down to where that lowest note is, and then add another one here. And now you can use this on the filter cutoff to get a lot more control over the range of the key tracking. See, we can start kind of making sure that that higher note, that the filter opens up more. Yes, okay, I know what I want. Let's see where. We can do that maybe, just having one higher note there. It's gonna be very subtle variation, but that's probably all that we need. We can try the multiband compressor to maybe see if that makes it. We do have a lot of width, but most of the time during this moment I don't really mind it too much. I can fix it later, because also when we bring it all the way down it just gets really phasey and it's just not nice, so I would usually just work with that and then maybe use mid-side EQ later to kind of fix the stereo issues, or just even resample it and find the best sounding parts that sound the best in mono, and then just use those in audio, and then just get rid of all the sections that don't sound good, and then basically just make a perfect bass line out of it. How can you make a higher bass note hit heavier and darker without moving the original fundamental? Not sure what you mean with it. Oh yeah, sometimes you might hear something from my headphones, that's true. I don't have closed-back headphones right now, so that sometimes happens, yeah. See if we can add a bit of automation to this frequency to just give it a bit more, I don't know, make it sound a little bit more interesting. Might actually do it with an auto filter. Let's just take an auto filter with a notch. Then we can just use the LFO that's built in. It's a little bit easier. Let's do that. And playing around with the offset is really going to matter a lot in this case, because what it's doing, if you listen closely, and if I put on an EQ, you'll also be able to see it. If I bring the resonance all the way down, you'll see that we have pretty much the notch moving up and down. See? Right here. And if I use the offset, it's going to offset where in the sine wave LFO shape it starts playing, so we're going to get a different result. And we can sort of like tweak the position of this notch depending on where that high note comes in. So I want that notch to be in a particular position when the high note plays. And we're just gonna have to find the best sounding position, but we can, and I should start playing from here. Or we could, for instance, do 180 degrees. And depending on where we set this, we're gonna get different results. It's subtle though, but it definitely matters a lot. Okay, that's a bit of a start, I guess. This could be sort of like the main groove that the drop is gonna sit around. Obviously, it sounds way too basic for now, but I wouldn't really worry too much at this point about the fine little details of everything, because that way you're just gonna get stuck writing an 8-bar loop, and then you have a really good 8-bar loop, and then what? You know, it's something that I hear a lot when I ask questions from people, and when people ask me questions during my tutorials and my live streams as well. It's just, a lot of times people focus too much on that one single loop and making that one single loop sound as good as possible, but then you have an 8-bar loop and then you're kind of stuck in that, right? Or you have a 16-bar loop and on itself it sounds really good, but you've put so much work in it that now you're kind of stuck with just that loop, and everything you put after it is just going to sound weaker because there isn't really that much work put into it. So I try to not really worry too much about what everything sounds like and if everything sounds very good at this particular moment, because we can always go back to it later. Probably not in this stream because we don't have the time for that, but you get what I mean. So let's just say we have this. Now, can we use this intro with this drop? That's the question. Can we make this work? Probably, but where's the drop gonna come in? Let's see where it sounds logical. Damn, time is flying. Time is absolutely flying. I'm just gonna leave that sidechain on. It sounds a little bit weird. We could maybe introduce this one in this section, so let me just make a copy real quick. Use that here, and let's just filter that a bit. Maybe do a bandpass filter on it. Kind of introduce this here. Sounds a little weird with the pad. question is that maybe this section of the pad is not in the right key. That could be the case. Because it's resampled, of course. It's always hard to figure out, like with these resampled files, especially if there's a lot of stuff happening in these files. It can be hard to figure out the pitch, but let me check. Let me check if I can see, if I can hear it properly. Yeah, I think it's actually correct. Just has a couple of interesting harmonics that might sound a little weird with that bass. I guess we're just gonna work a bit on that drop because we're gonna have not that much time today. I wish we had more time. Let's see if we can make that bass interesting. So I have a bunch of racks that I'm making currently to do frequency splits with, so I can really easily just bring this in and have a 3-band frequency split going if it wants to. Come on, you can do it, Ableton. Ableton 11 is still a little bit, it has a little bit of a few bugs here and there when you load it, especially on my machine. It's it seems to happen on Windows machines more often than on Mac machines, but usually when you bring stuff in, it just freezes up for a bit and it takes a bit, I don't know, gives a weird CPU spike. This one is actually taking a really long time though. Come on, Ableton, what are you doing? This one is taking a very long time. Damn. Let me just look at the chat real quick while that's loading, because I don't know what's going on here. Come on. Oh, nice. Nice. One moment, boys. I'll restart Ableton real quick. Let me just do that. Interesting. And I'm just loading in a frequency split rack. It's literally just that. F in the chat, boys. F in the chat. One moment. Ableton is restarting. I should have saved. I'm not sure if it will recover everything, but it's not that big of a deal. Although the one thing it probably is not going to recover is that serum patch. Yeah, I've been trying to figure it out with the Ableton team as well, or just at least trying to figure it out and send them stuff that might be helpful to them to fix it. It seems to work. It seems to be happening on mostly people with Windows machines and Intel CPUs. At least that's what we've so far found out, at least. After party stream on my channel. Maybe. Not sure though, I don't have that much time tonight, but it's back though. It's loaded. Let me quickly check if the of course not, the base has not been saved. Anyways, it's back. There we go. Well, it's almost back. Having the little after, yes, there we go. You love that it happened? Well, I don't really love it that much, but hey, what can you do? I think I roughly remember what we had. We had some distortion on it, that's one thing that's for sure. And we had a filter with some movement on it. Now we're already pretty much halfway there. And I usually put a little bit of this on the drive as well. I mean, yes, but it just happens, right? It just happens. I also have to say though, it does also happen every now and then with Serum. I've updated Serum before the stream, so far no crashes because of Serum, but sometimes Serum also has a couple of issues on my machine. But I updated, so that should be gone again. I'm not sure exactly what I did. But that already comes close to what we had, I think. Let's use one of these instead. Let's try the low pass and notch. Oh, that's not really gonna do much, of course, because this sound before the distortion doesn't have that much harmonics. Like, there are quite a few harmonics because it's a saw wave, of course, but it doesn't have that much harmonics that you can hear the notch well, because it's being heavily distorted afterwards again. So let's just use the regular low pass. The width here is literally just coming from the unison, so it's just the unison itself. The width here is up all the way, but because I'm restarting the phase. Sorry, my bad. Because I'm restarting the phase, we still get a pretty consistent sound every time a note hits. We do have some stereo information happening, but if I do this, we can really start hearing the phasing, which is not always what I want. Sometimes I'll just have a little bit of width here, so it's more consistent. Trying to get back to where we were. So another thing that I do a lot when I have these kind of bass lines is take the main LFO that's controlling the sort of like the shape of the sound, and putting a macro knob on the rate of that LFO, so make sure it's not synced to the BPM, and then just putting that on the rate. Now note this is set to envelope, so it only plays once, and then using that, so we're just going to call that LFO rate, and then I can slow the LFO down if I want to. So what we can do then is we could go, for instance, in here, and we can start playing with the shape of that, or the speed of that LFO on the different notes. So listen, if I, for instance, do this, see, we get that. And we can start doing that on the individual notes here, to kind of change the tone of them, or so you can kind of hear what I mean, right? It's very subtle effects like these, but they do really help when you're writing a track, or when you're designing a good bass line. So you can see here, what it's really doing now is moving the frequency of this one around. Maybe a bit of that that maybe. Doesn't matter too much, very subtle. I think I had the distortion earlier. Oh wait, the low pass filter, my bad. Okay, let me grab the... I'm just gonna focus on this section for now. Let's just grab some of those drums and put them quickly here. Now mind, this is not gonna fit in terms of just like, hey, this is the intro and this is gonna be the drop. Don't worry about that. I'm not worried too much about the structure at the moment. Okay. Let's bring out isotope trash right now. Yeah, that Ableton or that Serum skin is really good. It's really nice, and it's called, what was it called again? Anthracite? Yeah, Anthracite. So it comes with different colors as well. It's such a good skin. It looks so clean compared to the default skin. So yeah, definitely grab that. Somebody in my Discord, or yeah, I think he was in my Discord, the person who made this skin. But it's a really good skin, definitely. So we have a good amount of stuff. And now let's get rid of that one. I'm scared to load in that frequency split rack, so I'm just gonna build one myself. I'm just gonna build one myself because I wanna maybe do some stuff to the mid range, but leave the sub clean. So just do this and just take a low pass so we have a clean sub. Is that skin on your Discord? Which skin do you mean? The one from Serum? The one from Serum is not. That one you can just download. It's just a download. You just have to go to whatever website it is. The skin itself is called Anthracite. So that's the name right there. Just type that into Google. Just type in Anthracite Serum skin and you're gonna find this. It's a free download. And you just can install that and you'll have it. The Ableton skin, if that's the one you're talking about, is on my Patreon. Patreon.com/ARTFX. So I guess we'll call this one low. And then we're gonna call... I can just duplicate this one. Oh, before I do that, one tip. Map the frequency of that low pass filter to a macro knob, so that you can actually control it later. Just call that crossover, and then you can control it later. Now we can duplicate the low layer, and it will have copied over this mapping. So now I can just switch this one out for a high pass, and then we're gonna have a frequency split. It's not gonna be perfect, but we're gonna have a frequency split where we can affect the higher frequencies. The limiter function, yeah, you can disable it. But it doesn't really matter too much in this instance because it's not necessarily hitting the top too much. Like, it is hitting it, but every now and then. It's not that big, so... See, then I don't really mind it too much. because it's not necessarily doing much either. So, but yeah, it is something you can definitely be aware of. Try and every now and then just check out what it sounds with that and what it sounds like without it, you know? Because sometimes if you push it really hard into that limiter and there's a lot of bass going into that limiter, it might have to work really hard, and that might actually reduce the perceived loudness of your bass sound, whereas without the limiter it might just sound really loud. So it is something you have to worry about, especially when you're dealing with a lot of sub. For instance, like a bass line like this one, like right now it's not even that good of a bass line yet, but there is sub in this sound already. So if we're going to process this, then that sub is also going to interact with the processing, right? So that is something that you definitely have to keep in mind. Did I already... I put an OTT on it, right? Yeah, I did. Okay, let's play around with that. I want to have it a bit more... Let's see if we add another filter here. Download link for the anthracite skin seems to be down. If that's the case, then I'll see if I can grab it for you guys and I'll post it in my Discord after the stream. I'll grab you guys an invite link to my Discord later during the Q&A session, and I'll search it for you guys and put it up in my Discord. I know the person who actually made that skin, so he's gonna be fine with that, so I can just grab it for you guys if you want. I'll have to see if I still have it. I think it came with an installation file, I'm not entirely sure, but I'll have to look for that to see if I still have it somewhere. 20 minutes until the Q&A. Oh boy, we didn't even get that much work done, but we did have a good conversation about sound design and stuff like that. What else can we talk about still? What else can we do? Okay, let's just work on this a bit more. Let's get this in here. Time flies when you're having fun. That's why I do really long live streams. Let's add some shaking. Probably have some shaker sample somewhere. Just need a single one for now. Just a nice and short one like that. I didn't expect I was gonna make a full track today. Don't worry. That's not... Should I do 16s? Yeah. Oh yeah, of course, we don't have an 8-note head either. Let me do this. And now, oh yeah, we had that. We had a whole bunch of different heads here. So I can just quickly find something else that might work. Let me mute this one for now. Oh wait, my bad. I'm like, why don't I hear 8-note heads? Because we're not working in 8 notes right now. We need another one here. Okay, and then we had that automation here, which I have to copy over. Yeah, my streams are always long. I usually just take my time and just sit there and just make music on my own pace. Okay, let's just do that. Let's just keep them nice and what do you call it? Nice and simple. Gates, and what I usually do with shakers is I just make them nice and short. That's loud. And most of the time I'll end up actually chopping some breaks up and finding some good sort of like shuffle parts that I can use later and sort of like layer up with a good shaker or something like that. Or sometimes I'll even just grab stuff from breaks and work with that. Let's see if we can do some automation on the bass. So I don't know why, but I wish I could do a bit more with this. Like, it is doing something, but oh whoa, that works. Making it an 18 dB per octave filter. Then let's just automate this. Let me boost the input gain of these sidechains a little bit so that it's actually going to do a bit more sidechain on those on that bass. And for this one I might even add a separate sub because we don't get that much sub from this layer. Like, there is sub, but it's not that much. It's probably good to add a separate sub to this one. Although we do get a good amount of sub. Let's add on this one. Oh yeah, I was doing the frequency split, my bad. On that one I can do, let's try some of those kilohertz effects. So maybe add some more width to the mid range, or just add some more movement in general. And it is all about fine-tuning as well. Probably want to add another. Again, very subtle changes depending on which mode you choose, but it is going to matter quite a bit in the end. Okay, that's a Q&A question. I see a good amount of Q&A questions coming in. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, because I'm going to be doing the Q&A in just a bit. your CPU would be around 60% by now. I mean, it's definitely good to invest in a good CPU when you want to do music production and when you do stuff with a lot of, you know, a lot of processing and a lot of, you know, just in general, a lot of sound design heavy stuff. Then a good CPU is definitely gonna help well. Or if you work with very big project files, then yeah, it's definitely wise to have a good CPU, because otherwise you're just gonna have issues, you know. I don't really like it yet still. Not entirely. So I probably... What can we add? Let's just throw another isotope trash on it. When in doubt, when it needs to have more grid, just add another isotope trash. Yeah, the ensemble is really nice. Just it's basically just a unison, but instead of having it inside of the synth, you have it as an effect, so you can just put it on anything. And the greatest thing of that is that you don't have to worry about putting it. Well, you can put it on very specific frequencies. You could just take a rack and just only bloop. Did you hear that? Oh, I can't speak. Only take like the really high frequencies, and then just put that unison or that ensemble effect on only the high frequencies, and that way you can really control what gets unison and what doesn't. So you could make a very monophonic bass sound, for instance, just without any unison in the synth itself, and just make a very monophonic bass sound that's super powerful and that's always gonna have the same weight and the same power, but then add unison to just the high frequencies, which inside of Serum, for instance, you would not be able to do that. Maybe you can kind of hack it around by just having one oscillator be completely mono, and that is going to be your pure sort of like mono oscillator, and then maybe having a second oscillator that is running through a high-pass filter, while the first oscillator is bypassing the high-pass filter. You could do it, you know, inside of Serum, but it's going to be more difficult, and you're also gonna waste that filter, right, that you need to high pass the other oscillators so that you can only add unison to the high frequencies. So yeah, I like it to have it as an effect. It makes a lot of sense to have that. It's just way easier to work with. Should we try and see if we can make this bass a little bit grittier even still with trash? And I think that's going to be the last thing we're going to do before we're going to dive into the Q&A section. You never heard of me? Well, I've been making tutorials about drum and bass for quite a while now. I didn't start my channel about drum and bass, so my older tutorials are mostly about dubstep and electro house stuff, but I eventually moved into drum and bass, and that's where we're now. And I think my first video was in... I forgot if it was 2009 or 2007, but it's been a really long time. I think my channel, I started that one in 2007 or something like that, so yeah, I've been around for a while, man. I could try multiband, but honestly, right now we're already... Sometimes it's just nice to just boost it and see what that does. Now that does bring up the sub a lot as well, so what we could do is reduce the sub in front of the distortion, so that we're basically bringing the distortion down, so that the heavy distortion, or we're bringing the sub down so that the heavy distortion isn't really interacting with the sub too much, or split it up into a multiband distortion. Of course, that's another solution. But you can hear it, right? If we have the sub just at its loudest position, that sub is really pushing the distortion, and if we bring it down, we get a much cleaner sort of like mid-range. So I think this bass is gonna need a separate sub, but the mid-range is actually staying pretty clean if we leave that sub down a bit. We don't want to take it out completely, because then that sub is not interacting with the distortion anymore, and we do want to have that, but we don't want to have it as much as it was doing like when we're doing this. Yeah, I had that is indeed the first public video on my channel right now, I know, but I had videos older than that I've taken down at some point. Let's try multiband on this one. Let's see what that does. As the last thing that we're going to be doing, probably. Let's reset this. Yes. Oh, let's go into multiband. Take this one as well. Just quickly put a limiter on that. I'm not sure how loud those drums are peaking right now, but just let's just put a limiter on it. Getting there, yeah. I mean, it's a slow process, right? It's a slow process to find the initial groove, but the moment you've finally found the initial groove and that one sounds sort of like roughly okay, that's when you can sort of like start sketching out the entire structure of the track. And from that moment on, it's just basically just making variation and making things better. But I feel like the initial groove is the most important, and I think this is sort of like a really quick sketch that you would probably have at the end of your first session, you know, when you're just putting in an hour or 2 hours and just write sketch out a little idea, then this is probably going to be something what you have. You might have like an extra lead synth on top of it or something like that, but you're probably not going to have a full drop sketched out after 2 hours. Maybe you do, I don't know, maybe you do, but I don't. Can I show the piano roll of the bass? Sure. It's basically just, this is something that you see in drum and bass pretty much, well, almost every track. Either the track stays on one note, and it just plays one note at a time, or it plays just one note throughout the entire drop. That's something that might happen, or it just repeats one note. But what you see a lot is basically just one semitone intervals. So in this case, we would be writing around the key of E, and then just using that F note on top of it. So that one semitone interval just creates tension, and that is something that is used a lot in drum and bass. It's used a lot in metal music, for instance, as well, for that sole reason. It adds tension, those one semitone intervals, and then combining that with an octave jump is most of the time going to work really well as well. So if you have, what is that? Is that a hi-hat? My bad. So if you have, and then that octave jump going up, it's always going to help. And there again, you can do that one semitone interval. So that's really going to be good for drum and bass. And you have that most of the time within the scales that you'll be using. Like, even though music theory isn't that important when you make drum and bass, there are a couple of simple rules that you can sort of like keep in mind, right? Let's say you're using E and F, you can do that again on B and C if you're working in E, for instance, because B is going to be a perfect fifth above E, and then C is going to be a perfect fifth above F. So you have that E and F, but then you're going to have that again on B and C. So you can utilize that as well to kind of add variation maybe somewhere. I guess we should be going into the Q&A now, right? It's almost time for the Q&A. If I'm correct, all the questions for the Q&A should be in my Discord. Or in Discord for me, yes. Okay, I guess we can just go through these questions right now. Let me, oh, now you see Discord as well. Let me make it a little bit smaller, so I can still see the chat as well. Yeah, that's better. Now I can see the chat and the questions. Good. So we have a good amount of questions, actually. Let me make that a bit bigger. Okay, let's see. First one. I've seen producers building all their sounds from synthesis. Which is best, sample or synthesis for drum design? I wouldn't say there is a best. I wouldn't say there is a best between samples or synthesis. I think it's more about what sound you're going for. Like, if you're going for a really digital sound, let's say a la Mephius or something like that. Mephius has a really digital sound. Another good example would be Phase, for instance. They both have a really digital sound when it comes to their drums. Those are probably done with synthesis, or maybe synthesis in combination with a few one-shot samples here and there, but it's probably going to be mostly, you know, working with very basic samples or synthesis itself, and probably a combination of the two. But then there's also going to be tracks where it's more like break based, where the drums are more based on drum breaks and loops and that are sampled from old records, for instance. And in those instances, most of the time the drums have a more live sound, so it really depends what you're going for. And I think for one, like if you're going for a digital sound, then synthesis is going to be your best friend. But if you're going for a more organic sound or a more live sounding break, then you probably want to focus on that and focus on maybe sampling something or taking something like Addictive Drums to write some more acoustic sounding drums, and then you can always add a digital layer later to it if you want to reinforce some of those drum sounds. But I think it really depends on what you're going for. But yeah, combining both worlds is indeed the best option. That's always what I end up doing. But for one track it might lean a little bit more towards the digital side, but for a different for another track it might then lead a bit more towards the live sounding side. It kind of depends on the sound of the track as well. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. What are common problematic EQ spots during your production? Well, I have one frequency in particular. It's not necessarily an issue for you guys, but it is an issue in my room. Currently I'm working on my headphones, but if I'm working on my speakers, I have one particular frequency in my room that just sort of like builds up in the corners of the room. And if I move around in my room, in some areas I have a frequency that just peaks out a lot. So I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but I think what you mean is more like problematic areas in your mix down or in your mix itself. It's always a good, so like a good area to keep in check is always around so like the 1000 hertz. I find if I have too much of that in my sounds, like for instance with kick drums, not sure if this one, yeah, I took out a little bit here, a little bit higher than 1K, but sometimes around 1000 hertz, if there's too much of that in sounds, I just find that sounds a little bit, I just don't like the sound of it. In general, just high frequencies, if they're too loud, then it gets really ear piercing. So I think high frequencies are always very smart to keep in control. It's easy to overdo them, right? It's easy to add too much high frequencies and get everything sounding really ear piercing. But not enough is also not good, right? Because then everything is going to sound dull. So it's sort of like a fine line between there. And sometimes you really want to keep some areas, especially 1K to 4000 hertz, I guess. That area is really one that you want to keep in check. Next one. What do we have more? Can you direct me how to get a bass similar to the one in K9's Phase Away track at the beginning of the drop? I don't necessarily know that track. So I can't really comment on that, sadly. Q&A, are you a Star Wars fan? No, absolutely not. I've... Some of you are probably gonna hate me for this, but I've never seen a single Star Wars movie. I don't know. It has never really interested me, to be honest. I do have an interest in sort of like sci-fi, but the sort of like sci-fi that I'm more interested in is I guess more the cyberpunk sci-fi kind of stuff. I did read a lot of the William Gibson novels. So William Gibson is probably one of the best known, well, maybe not the best well-known sci-fi novelist, but he's definitely a really well-known writer when it comes to sci-fi novels. He wrote Neuromancer, which is one of the, I guess, it's not the most well-known cyberpunk novel, but it's definitely a good one, and I'm more into that than into Star Wars, per se. But Star Wars itself, no, never seen it. Oh no, my moderator's here. My moderator is here. He's now gonna force me to watch Star Wars. Okay. Blade Runner. Blade Runner is absolutely amazing. That's definitely one that I really like. Yeah. Do all drum sounds need to be at the same key of the track that we can hear? It depends. I already quickly touched upon this in the stream. I think drum sounds, it really depends on the drum sound. Kick drums, I usually have them in key of the track, but when they're really short, sometimes it just doesn't matter. Same thing with snare drums. If they're really short, and if it's more like a clap, for instance, or if it's more like a rim shot, then it's probably not going to be easy to even figure out the pitch itself. So in that case, most of the time what I'll be doing is just doing it by ear. Just listening and just pitching the snare up and down until I think it sits right. And when I'm designing it from scratch though, then you have that full control, and then I would probably just design it in the pitch that I want to have it. With kicks, most of the time I'll have them in the root of my track, or maybe hitting on a perfect fifth above the root, depending on the sort of like the vibe that I'm going for. Like for instance now, if the kick drum hits on E and it hits on E0, it becomes like it probably will be a really subby kick, a really low kick, whereas if I want it to be more punchy, I might tune it to B, which is going to be a perfect fifth above E, so that would work. But then again, if it's a really short kick drum, it probably doesn't matter. If it's a long 808, like I said earlier, definitely make sure it's tuned. Do you have to synthesize your own drums? No, you don't. No, you don't. That's a quick answer. No, you don't. You can do whatever you want. You can start with one-shot samples. You can, I don't know, you can take a trash can and smack it with a wooden stick and record that and use it as a snare drum. If it sounds good, it sounds good, and that's the main thing you should keep in mind. You probably get this question a lot, but do you have any tips for a starting producer, because I find it all quite daunting? I think that, yeah, I can understand that. If you start out, everything is probably going to be daunting, especially when it comes to music production, because there's just so much to learn, and just there's so much to do, and there's so much tools out there. Yeah, it's going to be daunting. What I always tell people, especially when I get people that want to start making drum and bass, and they have like no prior knowledge about music production, I always tell them, try and make a couple of easier genres first, like something that's maybe a slower tempo, or something that's just going to be a bit more simple in terms of the structure. So one thing that, like where I come from, my background is in hip-hop production. So I used to make hip-hop beats before I got into electronic music, and I did mostly old-school boom-bap kind of hip-hop beats, which mostly rely on just a couple of one-shot samples for the drums, you know, load those into a drum machine or an MPC, something like that. I never owned an MPC, but I had some, you know, similar tools, and then just working with that, and that would most of the time be what I would do. So, and then other than that, you most of the time need a bass line and a sample that you sample from another track and that you chop up and flip around into something new. Maybe combine two samples, but in general, the structure of the track is not going to be too complicated. So if you're gonna have that, and it's not gonna be that complicated to write the entire structure, you can focus more on sort of like figuring out what all the tools do. right? As opposed to, let's say, you're gonna dive straight into something super technical with a lot of sound design and a lot of very technical terms and super, well, giant effects chains and stuff like that. That's probably not going to be what a beginner wants to do. Like, it might be what they want and what they want to be able to do, but you're also not gonna, I guess, how do you describe that? You're also not gonna paint a full, I don't know. You're also not gonna paint a full cityscape with a lot of detail before you've even learned the basics about painting, right? So you really want to start with the basics when it comes to stuff like that. And when you find it daunting to start out with as a music producer, go on YouTube. You know, go on YouTube and just watch some tutorials about the basics of the DAW that you use and start experimenting, start exploring, and really pay a lot of attention to what everything does that you use. There's so much content available on YouTube these days. When I started music production, I was mostly using forums and just talking to people on forums and reading forum posts and reading magazines and stuff like that. You guys have it a lot more easier now as opposed to, let's say, 15 years ago. So, what more can we answer? Let's see. Do you use any analog outboard gear for post-production? At the moment, I don't. I do have a little rack standing there, but everything is disconnected at the moment because I don't have enough in and outputs on my current audio interface. I am thinking about maybe incorporating that again, but I don't necessarily need it, you know. It's cool though, like if you have outboard gear, it's definitely cool to use, and it will help to kind of color the sound a bit, which is always nice. I find most of the times when I would use these is mostly just use it for some additional grit or some additional processing, and just to see what it sounds like if I run it through some outboard gear. I still have a Chaos pad somewhere as well, which I never use anymore, but I should probably get that one out someday again. But other than that, I don't really have much outboard gear. I mostly work in the box. I find like working digitally is mostly what I do. Is there a sequence of steps or procedures you take when creating? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. What I find when I'm making music, it's more like about you're first gonna look for an initial idea, of course. You're gonna either come into the DAW with a particular idea in mind, or you come into it not necessarily with a particular idea, and then it's just gonna be, you're gonna have to search for it, right? But as soon as I found that initial idea, or that initial thing that will inspire me to write a track, I don't necessarily have a specific steps that I'll go through. It's more like listening to what I have and then thinking about it and saying like, okay, what does this need? And then I can think about, okay, what do I need to do to achieve that? So it's not a set kind of steps that I do, but it's more like knowing what your tools do and knowing what tools you have at your disposal. And then at the moment when you need to do something, you can start thinking about, okay, how can I do that with the tools that I have? So it's more, I think that's more how you should you know, approach music in general. As opposed to, okay, I need to start with the drums. I need to then make the bass line. I need to then do this. And I need to put distortion on the drums because that's what I always do. You know, don't do it like that. Just work and listen closely to what is happening and think, okay, the drums need to be bigger. The drums need to be fatter. Maybe add some distortion to the drums, but you don't always have to do that, right? So, yeah, I don't think a set steps or a set kind of steps to go through is what I would do. No. It can help though, like if you're completely stuck and, I don't know, let's say you've been stuck for weeks and you just nothing comes out and you've just been staring at a blank Ableton project for a couple of weeks straight. Maybe it could work, you know, setting up a couple of guidelines and then just saying like, okay, I'm going to make this first, I'm going to take this amount of time for it, and then I'm going to move on to the bass, and I'm going to do this amount of time on the bass, and then do that. I don't know, it could work to sort of like just push you through it. But I think it's always just a matter of like whatever inspires you, and that's the main thing you should worry about. You should worry about what inspires you and how you can build upon that and make that better. What else do we have? Is Serum still worth it now that Vital is out? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Serum and Vital, they're very similar in a way, but they do both have their own sort of like little things that they're good at. Plus the interface is slightly different, so you know, depending on what you want, what you are comfortable with, I guess both are just really good synths. Maybe for Serum there's a little bit more content available in terms of like tutorials and stuff like that, because Vital in general is just newer than Serum. But I think in general they both are just really good synthesizers, and I think they both are just phenomenal wavetable synths. So yeah, whichever one you like most. And in my opinion, like, Vital is free, so there's no excuse to not even get it. Even if you just want to try it out and you never use it after that because you like Serum more, I mean, it's a great synth. And I'm actually working on a couple of tutorials about the Vital wavetable editor soon, which I think is really interesting. I've been making some wavetables, and I'm working on a pack with wavetables right now, and there's just so much you can do with the wavetable editor in Vital. I think that's where Vital mostly differs from Serum as well. Like, the wavetable editor in Serum is, well, you guys know it, right? You guys know the wavetable editor in Serum. It's a really good wavetable editor that has a lot of sort of like additional options right here that you can use to, you know, process the wavetables and make them sound interesting, or make them sound different. The Vital wavetable editor works in a slightly different way, but also has different effects, so I think that's where it really differs from Serum. But in for the most part, they are just very similar in terms of the synths. The filter shapes are slightly different in both of them, so yeah, that again, I think they're just two tools that are similar, but both have their own little quirks and things that they're good at, you know? Any thoughts on what to expect when raves start happening again? As producers had a lot of downtime to work on things, experimental sets, productions. Are you excited? Well, I don't play shows, first of all. I don't play shows. I'm just a producer. I work more behind the scenes. I make music, and I make sample packs and preset packs, and mostly do tutorials and help people make their music sound better, stuff like that. I do think it's going to be interesting, though. I think there's a lot of people that because of this whole situation that has been going on in the world, because they're now sitting down, they're not necessarily making music for, you know, for shows. They're more now, a lot of people are sitting down now and they're having more downtime. So maybe we'll see more experimental music. It could be a good chance that that's actually going to happen, because I think a lot of people are also, when you're not touring the entire week or month, you're going to be in a different mindset too, right? So you're probably going to end up with different sounding music than as opposed to when you're continuously making music that is going to work very well on a dance floor. So yeah, I'm really interested to see when everything is going to open up again, and what everything is going to sound like, what people have come up with. Not too sure if we are going to be open soon though, because the Netherlands isn't doing that good, but we'll see. Any tips to get a simple yet effective workflow? I think what you just should worry about is what works for you. You know, workflows are different for everybody, and you just have to find out what works for you. And the same thing goes with DAWs, because I think DAWs and workflows are very sort of like intertwined, right? You want to try out a couple of different DAWs and try out the different ones that you like, and just search which DAW fits your workflow, right? I think that's the most important thing. And I think the other thing that you really want to make sure is just learn your tools well. So not necessarily learning like how to do sound design and stuff like that, but learning how every effect and everything that you use works. Because then you can apply it easier as well, and that's going to speed up your workflow. So if you want a simple and effective workflow, the best way to get that is just to really know your tools, because that way you can speed that workflow up. If you don't know your tools and you're just only experimenting and you're only just, I guess, doing things by trial and error, without really any knowledge about whatever tools you use, then yeah, your workflow is probably not really going to be fast. So I think those are things that are always sort of like intertwined with each other, and you really want to make sure that you know your tools well. What do you think about default channel strip on every audio and MIDI track with your go-to plugins or racks? I don't do that. I think I don't approach any sound like that. I think every sound is different. You know, every sound sounds different and thus needs a different approach as well. I can get behind making some racks and just having some racks that you can use to quickly fatten things up. I can get behind that, you know. That's something I would definitely advise you to do if you use Ableton or FL Studio. Make some patchers or racks, whatever you use. Make them and just... That's a good practice to do, right? Because when you're working, it'll speed up that workflow again, just to tie back into the previous question. But putting a standard sort of like strip or rack on every track just for the sake of it, no, I wouldn't do that. It's only going to make things harder for you probably, and it's only going to use extra CPU because you're probably not going to be using everything in that channel strip that you've made. So is there really a reason for it? Probably not. Just, yeah, I don't really see the point of it, you know. I do know people who do that. I do definitely know people who do it, but I don't necessarily see how that would be a good thing to do. But then again, if it works for you, then that's the most important thing, right? Do you have... Oh, wait, we already answered that one? Oh, no, that's a new one. Do you have any go-to produce music philosophies as to making music? Ooh, that's a deep one. Do I have any go-to produce or music philosophies? Yeah, not really, I think. I don't necessarily know what you mean with philosophies and how I would apply that to necessarily to music production, but that might be a little language barrier there. That don't hate me for that. Do you like Russian DNB producers, and who is your favorite? I mean, I like drum and bass wherever it comes from. I don't think a nationality or anything has anything to do with it. What matters is how the drum and bass sounds, and what matters is how the music sounds. And if you come from wherever and your music sounds good, then I'll like it. Simple as that. I don't really have a favorite Russian producer. There's maybe a couple of ones that I used to listen to, but I don't really have much of favorites in that. I don't have, I used to listen to a lot of Mastak, but I'm not sure if he is originally Russian or if he's originally from somewhere else. I think he was from that sort of like area of the world though, but I'm not entirely sure. I used to listen to a lot of his tracks in the past, but... "10 minutes remaining. Okay, let's see if we can go through the last list of questions then. Does it make sense if you put the same preset of Serum 2 times in a group and use one for sub by cutting all the highs and use the second for harmonics?" Sure, you can do that, but you don't necessarily need two serums. If you use Ableton, that is. Like, if you use Ableton and you have one serum, so let's just put a MIDI track here, and let's put a serum on that. We're not going to make a bass sound, but just to demonstrate, you don't need an additional serum. Let's say this is serum with your bass sound. It is just a sol wave, and you need a separate sort of like low layer and a separate one for the high frequencies, or just for the harmonics. You can just put an audio effect rack on this, and you can just create two chains. Have one low pass, so put a low pass filter on that, and have the other one high passed. And that way you basically do it with one serum. You don't need two serums. And then the beauty of that is that you won't have to, you know... Best is to make sure that the frequencies are the same spot, but I'm just doing it quickly. See, so now we're gonna have both a sub layer, and then in the other one, we'll have the higher frequencies. So you can do it with one serum, and now the beauty of that is that you can always go back into that patch and change it up, and you don't have to worry about having to change up two individual serums. So that's always a good tip I can give you. Unless you want to have like a completely different sub that does something different, then you will need a second serum, but best is to do it just with one serum so that you don't have to worry in case you have to, I guess, tweak the synth later, or tweak the patch. How should I approach a drum and bass label to promote my music? mostly just how you would approach any label, right? Make sure what labels really look for is they obviously look for good music. That's gonna be the main selling point. If the music sounds good, that's the biggest thing that matters. But just good sounding music is not only that. Like just imagine, like if they get a demo of you and you are the only person and your music sounds good, they'll probably sign you, right? They'll probably get in touch with you and say like, hey, we want to release this. If it fits their label, of course. That's something to definitely keep in mind. When you send stuff to labels, don't just send your stuff to any label that releases drum and bass, but listen to what type of drum and bass the labels release and find labels that would work for the type of drum and bass that you make. And I think that is a really important thing. And then the other thing that you should keep in mind is how much time you already spent setting up some kind of a following on social media, which could be on YouTube, could be Instagram, could be Twitter, SoundCloud, doesn't matter. But if you have a following or you've gotten at least some kind of traction and you've made sure that your branding across social media is uniform, right? It's the same across all your social media profiles and everything looks a bit professional, then that is going to help. Because let's imagine there's two people sending in a track to a record label. One of them has a really good track and has no presence on social media, has no sort of like branding around himself. He has an artist name and he has a piece of music, and that's it. And then we have a second person who also has a good track, maybe just as good as the other one, but this person has maybe a couple of thousand people that follow him on social media because he's been really active on social media for a couple of years straight, and he's been putting some time into that, sharing some photos of himself, maybe sharing behind the scenes clips of him working in the studio, stuff like that, or working in your bedroom on your doll, it doesn't matter. But getting that interaction with fans or potential audiences of you is going to be something that is going to be really valuable to a record label, because that means that there is a market for your music and that there is already, you know, a small group of people that they can market that to. Even though they're probably going to market it and try and expand on that, but having that initial sort of like audience already there is really going to help selling your music to a record label. Because in the end, a record label is always going to be looking at, can we monetize this, and how easily is it going to be to monetize this, right? In the end, a record label has to earn some money from their releases, so that is going to be a really key selling point. And I think, yeah, especially these days, social media is probably one of the most important things to definitely, next to just the music itself, get right. And you don't have to be like super professional on social media, but just make sure that you don't use different avatars on every social media or different images. Make sure that everything is sort of like similar, that you're called the same on all your social media profiles. That's really gonna help. It's often a hard decision using FX in parallel mode or 50% dry or full wet. What do you recommend? Depends on the sound. Depends on the sound. If it's a sound that already sounds really powerful and I don't want to lose that power, I'll add something in parallel. If it's a sound that I just, you know, want to make different, then I'll probably use just a regular dry wet. The key point here is that if you use something in parallel, you don't affect the original sound, but you just add something to it. Whereas with a dry wet, you're going to decrease the volume of the original sound while you bring the processed one up, right? So that's going to be a slightly different way of doing things. Very similar though, but if I have a sound that I just want to add something to, then it's time to use parallel processing. What are your go-to plugins beside Trash? Right now I would say Vital for synthesis. Vital is an absolute phenomenal tool. But next to synths, one tool that I really like a lot is Contact. I use quite a bit of Contact stuff, Contact libraries. And when it comes to processing, my absolute favorite tool at the moment for just processing any sound and making it interesting is, what was it called? Output. Damn, I forgot the name. Where is it? Output Portal. Portal by Output. It's such an amazing tool. Like, even if I just put it on this layer right here. Where is it? On this one. Where did I put it? I threw it on somewhere, but now I can't find it. well, never mind. This thing right here, it's absolutely amazing. You can just take any simple pluck sound, any simple melodic sound, a pad sound, and just add this to it, and it's basically a granular effect. So it has like additional tools in here, and it just chops the incoming audio up in grains and does weird stuff to them, reverses them. It's able to do delay and reverb and all kinds of other effects, and the presets that come with it are really great. So you can just use these presets, use this to kind of morph through the sound and change it up, and just in general I'll just have that playing with the sound going through it and then just record the output. That's usually what I do, and it's such a good tool for sound design. Can be a little bit hard to control sometimes, and a little bit unexpected what comes out of it, but like unpredictable. But other than that, it's if you just record the output and then chop like the good sounding bits out of it, you're probably gonna get some really good sounds. Output is phenomenal. I've been working with Output for quite a while. I actually was one of the people that promoted their first contact library when I think that was Output Ref, which was a contact library for like reversed sounds. I was one of the people that was, that helped them promote that product when they were releasing that. And in general, ever since then, Output has been putting out really good stuff. Definitely, yeah. Check out the whole Melda plugs. Oh, that's a good one that I could definitely bring forward too. I use Melda a lot. I haven't used them today in this stream, but when I'm actually doing like mixing stuff, Melda stuff is absolutely phenomenal. But also for sound design, it's really good. Definitely pick those up. What else do we have? Do we have a couple of more questions? Which monitors I'm using? I'm using a pair of really old monitors right now. I mostly work on my headphones. And I have a pair of old Alesis monitors, but I know those really well. And I think that's more important than me getting a new pair of monitors that are up to date with what's out today. Like I said, I mostly work on my headphones because of neighbors, and I can't really work too loud other than maybe a couple of hours a day during midday, right? But I'm not always at home then. So most of the time I work on my music in the evening, which means I gotta work on my headphones. So yeah, don't really use my monitors that often, to be quite honest. Yeah, I'll just answer the last couple of questions, I guess, and then we'll answer this one. That will be the end. So let me just go through the last couple of ones. Do you use Soothe 2? Yes, I've recently started using Soothe, and it's an amazing tool. It's a really good tool. I've been lucky that the team from Ook Sound have sent Soothe to me, and they've also sent me the Transient Shaper Spiff, so I'm gonna be actually doing some videos about that soon on my channel. That's the plan. I'm currently getting used to them. I've only had them for maybe a week or two now, so I'm kind of getting used to them, learning them inside out, and really reading through the manual as well, and sort of like getting familiar with all the features. And then I'll probably do a couple of videos about these two plugins because they're absolutely phenomenal. Soothe 2 is so good. Like, for what if you have any sound with resonances that you want to take out, you could use a dynamic EQ like Pro Q3, but you're gonna have to set up the frequencies, right? Soothe does that all automatically. It just finds the incoming resonant frequencies and automatically reduces them, which is really good. Yeah, I'm really happy with that one. Where can I hear a track made by me? Well, I guess during my streams on my own YouTube channel. No, I'm working on new music right now. I have a couple of tracks out that are quite old. I've spent a lot of years in the last few years making tutorials, doing live streams, and just doing that. And because of that, I really haven't had much time to finish my actual tracks, right? So I've now taken a little bit of a step back, focusing more on doing maybe 1 or 2 tutorials a month, and then doing my live streams every week, and then in the meantime working on new music, which is going to come out hopefully soon. So what's the best way to add white noise fizz over top of basses? What I usually like is distorting a bass with white noise together. So taking a sub bass and distorting that with the white noise, and then maybe high passing it and adding a separate clean sub again. But I find that having that sub bass frequency with the noise going into a distortion is really what gives it the crunch. So It's just like you can distort white noise, but it's not really going to do anything, right? White noise is already pretty much a distorted mess. So you can distort it, but it's just going to get louder. If you put a sub through it as well and take that sub together with the white noise, then that sub is going to trigger the distortion, and that sort of like fundamental frequency in the sub is going to be applied to the white noise. So that's how you can get the white noise to sound really gritty and fuzzy. But yeah, like I said, if you distort it too heavily, then that distortion might create a lot of harmonics on top of the sub, so then you might have to high pass it again and add a separate sub. We have a couple of questions left. Have you ever... Oh, one moment. Have you ever... Would you like to produce game soundtrack? Oh, okay, I know what you mean. If I've ever produced a game soundtrack, I did. I'm not sure if the game has ever been released, but I did make a game soundtrack one day. I was approached by a company, a very unknown small company. I think it was a mobile game as well, and it was some kind of a mobile strategy game, something like that, Age of Empires kind of thing, something like that. And they asked me if I wanted to do the soundtrack for the trailer, for sort of like the promotional trailer of the game, which I did. I made the soundtrack, and I got paid for that, and I think the game never got released, so that's that. Last question. Do you want to continue this on your own channel? Would be cool. And maybe also a small feedback session with live commentary. I would love to do it, but I don't have a lot of time tonight. But I will have some time tomorrow maybe, so maybe tomorrow I'll do another stream. I'm kind of feeling like it, but not sure. I'll have to see. Definitely join my Discord server, because that's where you'll be able to stay up to date when I do live streams. So I'll grab you guys an invite to that Discord server as well, because some people here have been asking for that. So I'll post that in the chat real quick. So that way, if you want, you can join my Discord and stay up to date with any of the... Oh, the link is already there. Good one. The link is already there. Thanks for that. So yeah, that's going to be it for today. I'm really glad that DNB Academy is doing this. I hope we're going to see more collaborations in the future as well, between maybe other channels as well. There's some other music production channels that I think would be interesting to do collaborations with too. I think this is a very interesting concept. Yeah. So, thanks for being here today. Thanks for being here. Waiting for the serum skin. I'll go have a look after this stream, and I'll go have a look if I can find the files for that serum skin, and I'll post them in my Discord. Do you guys from DNB Academy have a Discord, by the way? I'm not sure. Never really checked. Do you guys have a Discord? Because if so, then I might have to join. Yeah. Unfortunately, everything has come to an end. I need to go and stop the stream. So, thanks for being here. I'll see you guys again on my channel upcoming Friday. That's when I always do my live streams. So I'm doing live streams on Friday. I'm sure that DNB Academy has a whole bunch of upcoming videos coming up as well. So definitely join the DNB Academy channel to stay up to date with that as well. Oh, they have a Discord too. I'll be joining that after the stream. I'll be joining that. Remember, if you want to help support me in particular, so if you want to help support me in what I do and want to help support me on my channel, then you can pledge some of your money on my Patreon, and you can grab some of my downloads from my Patreon as well. It's patreon.com/ARTFX. So, I guess that's gonna be it. Thanks for being here. Hope you had a great day, and hope you learned something today from the 4 people that did streams. And I guess we'll see you in another time. Peace.